Oh, yeah. Here we go. We have a friend of mine and best-selling author of the book, The Unstoppable Team in the house, aka the Team Whisperer, aka her real name, Lia Garvin. Lia, welcome to the show.
Hello, hello. I am so excited to be here with you today.
I'm happy to have you here. This seeing you watch this book and seeing how it came to life, not as your first book, but as your second book, was really, really awesome to me. So let's start here. Okay. What made you decide to write a second book? And what's this book all about?
Yeah. So it's such a funny question because I wrestled with it for a little while and I actually started an outline. I was like, oh, I don't want to do it. It's like I can't like make myself do this because I wanted to write the book. And I'll talk about what it's about in a second. And literally, and you know this, you came into the Career Starters Roundtable and you talked about your process and how you built a system with accountability where you can do it fast because I like to move fast, and that you can use this as a tool to get the message about how you want to help people. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, yes. And I wrote you immediately after. I was like, let's do this. And I just felt so much hope when I heard from you because when I wrote my first book, I worked with a traditional publisher. I was so excited. I got, picked up by something. It then took a year to come out. A traditional publisher doesn't really help you with the marketing promotion. Like, even if you're, even if you're a famous person, actually, like literally. And I had a lot of frustrations in the first process. And I said, gosh, I can't make this into a full-time job of figuring out how to do this like by myself. And I also can't invest tens of thousands of dollars in PR because I don't have a strategy around it. And so when I heard that, like, this is something that you give all of the tools and it's completely accessible. It was a no-brainer for me, and I instantly wanted to work together. And the fact that you were like, I know you want to move fast, I will help you do that, was just like the most. It's been awesome every step, and your team is incredible. So that is why. Now, funny I say team because what is this book about is it summarizes my 6-part system to building your unstoppable team as a small business or entrepreneur. And so when I work with companies that have great teams, it's like extra exciting. And I wrote this book because well, it's funny, a little bit about my story. I came from the corporate world. I worked in big tech for about a decade, and my roles were about streamlining team operations. I was a team operations manager working on product teams. And I would always see people say, oh, why is everything so much harder than it needs to be? Or, when work wasn't getting done, hey, I was at Google, Apple, Microsoft. It wasn't because people weren't smart. It wasn't because they weren't qualified. It was because there was little inefficiencies getting in their way. And I
Mm.
would talk about these things and people would say, what are you, like an HR person? Why are you talking about people all the time? And I said, no, this is really about the business. This is about how you scale and grow. And I kept finding myself feeling a little bit out of place. Like, I want to bring this message to more people. And so about 2 years ago, I left the corporate world and I said, you know what? I want to take these tools on the road. And as I started to meet with more business owners and entrepreneurs, people were saying, hey, all the stuff that you talk about with big teams, we need that. We've never heard these things before. And so I developed this system of, which I call the ops playbook, which is summarized in this book of, well, how do you connect the dots between, the vision and mission and strategy and how it's going to get done? And so that's what I bring to life in the book is, you've got the what and the why as that business owner, but the how, there's actually somebody that can help you get there and map it out and make it really easy to get your whole team on board so that everyone is bought into helping you grow your business, getting work done efficiently, and feeling bought in without feeling burned out.
Yeah, I love it. We had the privilege of spending a little bit of time together recently, and it was cool to also see you talk about it and about where you're taking this, because I think it's such an important thing. Because a lot of times, right, you mentioned you're at Google, Microsoft, these places. Most times entrepreneurs think of them as a very different thing.
Yeah.
But what you've kind of brought to light is that at the end of the day, it's people. It's about building these teams, whether it's small teams or larger teams. And it's about what are the systems? What are the things you need to have in place so that you can, in your words, create an unstoppable team. And so I love how you've really bridged that gap for the solopreneur, small business owner to the corporate behemoths, right?
Yeah.
Who have all of the things that are in the traditional world, but the things that they struggle with and the things that they succeed with. And you've boiled
Yeah.
it down into a very, very clear framework. And you call that the ops playbook. So walk us through kind of how you decided to structure this book, The Unstoppable Team, because I want to show people the difference between your first book, which is great, and then this book, which is very specific. So talk about the
Yeah.
differences and talk about why this book is so focused on the ops playbook and very, very tangible information.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think there's a lot of learning you have working with editors of the first book. That was like, oh, wait a second. I wrote a book and it was like, oh, the chapter should be organized more cohesively. And so I think part of it was so Unstuck, my first book, is about looking across 12 challenges that show up in the workplace, predominantly for women, but really for anybody. Things like feedback, comparison, negotiating, and how to use the tool of reframing to overcome them. And so, Unstuck was really about the personal, I would say, experience, like you as a person kind of navigating the world. What I want to do with this book is really focus on teams, because obviously that's my big passion and the work that I do, and also where I had so many kind of concrete, tangible skills or tools to offer to folks. And so I had the system, the ops playbook, which I mentioned is this 6-part system. And so that's how I structured the book is, well, let's really give people insight into each of these 6 tools, what they're about, how they work together, and then why the entire system is the differentiator between a business that's struggling and the business owner is really in the weeds, and one that's thriving. And so when I thought about the book, I wanted to make sure to talk a little bit about, do's and don'ts, where we get stuck in the first place, provide some tools, and then give folks some diagnostic questions so they can be implementing some of this stuff on their own and feel like they actually have their own playbook, so to speak, to be able to put this into practice.
And so, look, if we look at the subtitle here, right? A simple formula for managing your team, reducing overwhelm, and increasing revenue, right? This is a very specific book for a very specific person, which I love. I think this is so easily translatable. And just since you've launched it, you're already having a lot of people know exactly why they need this book.
Yeah.
What have been some of the benefits or some of the exciting moments that have happened since you launched such a specific book for a specific audience?
Yeah. I think one is that people feel it's really accessible and tangible. There's a lot of books out there about scaling businesses. There's a lot of stuff about teams. And I wanted to create something that adds to the conversation, right? It's like, hey, there's stuff out there, traction, different systems. And I wanted to make something that someone could pick up and feel like, hey, I'm just having a conversation with Lia. And that's what I've been hearing is when I read this, I don't feel overwhelmed. I don't feel like, oh my God, how am I ever going to do this? I feel like I can pick up these different tools and these questions and actually run with them. So that's been a really exciting piece of feedback that really was a goal of mine. I think folks saying that, again, it's really, it's something that makes the overwhelm of managing less overwhelming and feel like, okay, I got this. I have some of these things that I can try in my team. And I think pairing the book with my podcast, Managing Made Simple, is a nice place to you have this overview, and then you can go deeper into specific topics like, recognition or feedback or navigating change, because, you have a place to even deepen your learning a little bit more with the podcast.
So talk to me about this. Let's get specific here. We got the 6 different areas, right?
Yeah.
Walk us through some of the different areas, and then I want to dig into a couple of your favorite points.
Yeah. So the 6 areas are based on, well, what is the experience of an employee on a team? And this was very specific to noticing all the little communication breakdowns and frustrations that I saw for years in corporate. And then I heard echoed back to me by entrepreneurs and small business owners. And so the 6 are priorities, onboarding, expectations, work tracking, delegating decisions, and performance. And so if you think about it, across all of those different pieces, that's how you make sure everyone is clear on how to work on your team and be successful. Now, there's 3 though that absolutely must work together. And those are priorities, expectations, and performance. And I call this the holy trinity trifecta of, if you make sure that everyone understands what are the company's goals, what are the big priorities, maybe we have this revenue goal, this, serving this many customers, opening another location of our business, whatever that is. And you spell out how every single role, what their part in it is in that. Right. And let me give you an example. I work with a med spa and we talked about, well, how do you get the med techs to feel bought into the mission of growing the business to $10 million? I'm just over here cleaning machines. Like, why do I care? And I said, well, the story for that person is that when someone walks in here and they want to have a premium experience, what are they going to come back to? If the place is spotless, that's what they're going to talk about. If the machines are broken, if it's dirty, if it's not ready for them, that is the thing that's going to turn them away. And so this role of being a med tech and keeping all the machines ready to go, set up, clean, that role is so critical to getting us to that revenue goal, because that's what gets people walking back in the door. Right. So I love to help business owners figure out what is that story for every single employee. So that's priorities. Then
well,
expectation.
Let me interject. Let me interject here, because I like this. I want to go a little deeper on each one of these that we're talking about, because you know this shit, right? So let's talk about it. You mentioned the story that you just told is about a revenue, right? Priority was a revenue goal. When you look at companies, do you find that revenue is often that one big driving force, or do you find that there's a different metric or goal that is or should be the priority based on where somebody's at or where they want to go?
Yeah, I love the question. And I typically suggest having either a revenue or profit goal, because it's a number you can be measuring. And I think probably maybe profit's a little bit of a better one, because that's you can have a lot of revenue, you have a lot of expenses, doesn't really help you. I'm trying to cut down expenses with the work I do. So I do like to have a numerical goal so that it's a SMART goal, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely, right? Using that framework. Now, this doesn't mean you don't have a mission and values. And when I work with team, we do want to have that. But I have had companies say, well, I don't want to just my team to think I'm just focusing on numbers or whatever. I only care about the money. And it's not really about that. It's saying, hey, we need to have something concrete we can measure and hold everyone accountable to. So I do like having a numerical metric. Also, if you have a profitability goal, now we link back to performance. You can talk about, well, what target do we have to hit to get bonuses, raises, incentives? So it really helps people get bought in that you are running a business and they all have a role in helping grow that business.
Okay, that was great, because I think sometimes people are like, oh, well, what is my revenue goal? Or I'm just making up an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
What if there's something else that's more important? And I think that when I look at this stuff, we have a revenue goal that we're aiming for because we're in our scaling mode. So for us, our profit margins, we know, are going to be more flexible than they previously were, because we're trying to scale. We're bringing on more expenses. We're doing those things that could adjust that. So for us, I'm focused on a revenue goal. And then I have a back of mind profit goal, but the team is focused on helping us get to the revenue goal and why that matters.
Yeah.
And so how important is it? And then we'll move on to the next one. How important is it when you do put a financial goal or a numbers goal like this? How important is it to have the like, so what, or the why behind that in order to get that buy-in from people, so that they see it, right? And they tell that story for each employee or each team member.
Yeah. I mean, the why is of utmost importance, and it's got to connect back to your values and what you're doing as a company, and really, why you're here in the first place, who you're serving, how that's helping other people. I think folks need to feel that personal sense of purpose, and purpose is driven for why my role matters specifically. And so that's why it's twofold, right? That's why we want to have, a lot of clarity around the company's mission and values and the vision. And then, hey, but what about me and my role? If I'm doing something and I feel a little bit disconnected from that, how do I know that I'm not just a cog in the machine to help this like other person earn money? And that's something that is really common right now. A lot of folks and teams are feeling a lack of motivation. They're kind of feeling ambivalent about the work. And so showing people, hey, here's why your work is so important to helping us hit this goal, which helps us hit this why. Right. And so it's a twofold. I'm glad you brought up both pieces, that they have to be bought into the anchor of the vision of the company. The revenue goal should be based on the values that you've spelled out. And then you have to connect the dots between, hey, like your role specifically is like, doing the shipping and receiving, it's like, has this to do with it? Or, setting up, whatever, like if it feels disconnected, it has to feel like it matters to the central goal.
Yeah. Makes sense. Let's go to the next one that you want to share. I know we're going to go over 3 of the 6 here. So let's go to
Yeah.
that next one in your holy trinity of
Yes.
trifecta slash triangle slash anything that I could say that has 3 sides to it.
Anything
Let's
with
go to the next one.
3 legs of the stool. No. So the second one is expectations. And this encapsulates all of the things that when you say the words, why don't they just, or I wish I could have another one of me, or I feel like I'm always repeating myself, you got to dump every single thing into some sort of repository. That's why it's part of the playbook. And like everything on your mind that you want to be the way work gets done has to be laid out. Why is this? Because it prevents you from being a micromanager. Because micromanaging is only about when the course correction step takes place. If you set clear expectations up front, now you have something that you're pointing back to. It's like, oh yeah, this is just how we work here. It feels like micromanaging when it's happening on the corrective end, like after someone's already started working. Okay, so that's part of expectation setting. We also want to map out norms around how we run business, right? Maybe it's working hours, maybe it's being in the office. There's a lot, I think, with folks that are working in physical locations about customer service, making sure folks don't on their cell phones when people are walking through the doors, right? Like all these little details that define the secret sauce of your company. And this is how we go from having, if you have one flagship location of a business and you want to open a second one, well, how do you actually kind of quantify, well, what is the secret sauce? What does make you awesome? How do you make sure someone can be the manager of the next location and make it exactly the same? And so expectations kind of encapsulates all of the things that make your business unique
Hmm.
and all the things you want to hold people to as employees.
And so when you're writing these expectations, or if you're somebody who is like knowing that they're in that growth mode, right? And you're running a small business, or you're bringing on your team, you're making your next round of hires, like, do you encourage people to do like a 30-minute brain dump of everything that you expect? Do you do it first generally? Do you do it by department? What's kind of that first step? If someone's listening to this and they're like, oh, I really like what you're saying here, what's the how? Like, tell me the
Yeah.
secret sauce. And of course, they should buy your book, right? Like that's what your book tells them, right? But for now, for the people that are listening, let's give them like an actionable way
Yeah.
that they can actually start to do this and follow part of this process.
Yeah, I love that. So some of these diagnostic questions I ask are, what are things that you find yourself repeating over and over? What are some of the frustrations that you're feeling like, the question, why don't people just do this? What are some of the differentiators between how you work and how other companies work in your same sector? And so I think first, I like the business owner or CEO to think about these things. And it can be really helpful to do a team exercise, especially if you have a smaller team, to talk about these things together, because that's going to get everyone bought in and they're sharing those things out loud. So when we're figuring out communication norms around, using chat versus texting versus email or different things like that, or working hours, or, sort of setting up how we work, getting everyone as a team to share their ideas. If you're worried the ideas are going to be stuff you don't agree with, you can say, hey, this is the feeder time. I'm going to go back and distill and pick my top 5. You don't have to like agree to all of them. If your team members, you don't have to worry that you get stuck with stuff. But I think saying, hey, we want to co-create this work environment that we're all excited about. You can put out there, here's a starting point that I have. I'd love you to add to this.
Hmm.
And one super, life hack tip is framing this as a pilot or experiment. Whenever you're rolling out, this is my number one tip for rolling out any process or change on a team. Say, hey, we're going to try this for 6 weeks or for a quarter, and we're going to collect feedback and we will change it if something's not working. Okay, that is how you get people bought in to not being like, I don't know, like, should we work in the office? Like all the concerns. It's like, well, it's an experiment. We'll find out. We don't have to know right now the answer to that. So when we talk about team norms, I always encourage folks to frame it as a pilot and experiment, put a deadline on it. It's going to be for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever. And here's how you can share feedback along the way, or here's the forum where we will discuss if we want to continue with it, what's working or what's not.
Love it. Getting my notes dialed in here. I love it. Let's go to the performance now aspect of it, because that's tangible, and
Yes.
people can go ahead and start doing that exercise. And I love that last tip, right? Like, I think that last tip is really, really important, because I just think of some of the things that we're doing. It's like, okay, we have a new process. It's showtime. We need to test it to make sure it works, right? Like, hey, we've improved something, or we think we've improved
Yeah,
something, right? Sometimes a change in a process you think will increase the efficiency, but it might not, depending on factors that are out of the control of the scope, right? And so I think it's a really great tip to do it that way, because I also think that by doing this, and maybe correct me if I'm overstepping here, but that ties in with everything that we're talking about setting that expectation,
yeah,
right? So it limits that like all or nothing mentality, and instead says, hey, if it works, amazing. That's what we expected or we hoped. But if it doesn't work, oh, you know what? That's okay. Let's try it a different way versus, oh, we failed. I suck. We suck. We're screwed. Let's give up. Right.
exactly. 1000%. And one more thing it does, it reduces this. If you have to change it because you learn new information, it reduces this like, hey, we're changing all the time. Like, stop, where everyone's like, I can't stand another change because you're like, hey, we're going to pilot a couple things in this next year. We want to really dial this in. And so, one more thing, like you said, it's about setting expectation with your team. Like you mentioned, hey, we're in growth mode. We're going to be trying a lot of stuff. We want to get this dialed. And so what I'm going to need from all of you is to get on board with some of these experiments and to be sharing feedback as you go, so that you framed it that like, I'm not just a disorganized leader that like goes after a shiny object. I have an intentional strategy about finding what works and then dialing it in.
Love it. Love it. All right. Let's do performance, and then we'll
Okay.
start to bring everything
Yeah.
together here.
So performance, this came to be from years of looking at how corporate performance reviews have no connection to the work that we're doing and how frustrating that is for people. And I said to myself, one day I will teach people how to design a performance metric system that is effective. So here we go. The biggest disconnect I see on teams is not connecting sort of the how and the what. So like you have your job responsibilities, and then but you've asked people to also do other things. Like let's say I am a graphic designer and I completed all my tasks in ClickUp or Asana, but you as a business owner, you're like, well, I kind of wanted them to be looking more ahead at business development or client services or doing more, public, like speaking with clients and a little bit of that. And like, I'm frustrated as the business owner, the boss, because this person just did their tasks in a task list. Well, the reason that happens is because we haven't told people, not only am I expecting you to be focusing on some of the business development or growing the company or making a great team culture, whatever, you are being evaluated on that. And so the shift that I encourage folks to make is create a 3-part kind of performance evaluation, which includes one, did you do the job? That's only a third. So get rid of that being 100%. Second is, did you take a part in like building a better team culture or doing something like that, if that's a priority for you? And then the third piece is, did you take an active role in growing the business, right? And setting very clear, tangible metrics and measurable things for that. And when you do that, and then you evaluate people on that, hey, if they crushed their job, but they were really difficult to work with, there was constant, complaints of other people that they weren't collaborative, then there's a forum to be able to discuss that, because they can't just say, well, I did my job, because you say, no, you're evaluated on these 3 dimensions or whatever it looks like. So that's how I have been able to shift businesses from feeling like everyone's just task completion mode to people taking a proactive view on, hey, here, what about this other way to solve this project? Or what about this way to drive efficiencies? Because a lot of times teams don't have a dedicated ops person, and you need everyone to be really looking at like, how can I actually make my own process and my own work a little bit more efficient and effective? But they're not going to do that if they're not held accountable to doing it, right? Because it's like, there's a disconnect in your mind. So you could say, hey, part of how we're evaluating you is making sure we're always improving our workflows. And I'd like to ask you quarterly to share a couple optimizations you can make, right? Like actually name these things specifically, and you will start to see that people are shifting into that kind of ownership
Mhm.
mindset that's so invaluable.
That's a really interesting perspective. I think that we're in like kind of like this culture of, if I do my job, I should be getting praise for it, right?
Yes.
And I almost think like, and I've seen this, and I've talked with a lot of different people about this, and this is obviously it's different based on industry, what tier you are in your role, how much
Yeah.
experience you have. I think there's a wide variety here, so this isn't like a blanket statement, but I love how you framed it. So you're not just getting, oh, you did your job. Okay, great. we love that from you. Like that's the bare minimum of what we expect as part of you do. That's 33%
Yeah.
of what this job really is. And then there's the other components. But I feel that what you're doing now is you're now opening the door for people to say, hey, this is how you're being evaluated. You're not just being evaluated on your task or basic job duties. You're being evaluated on how you fit with the rest of us. You're being evaluated on, well, are you a long-term or a short-term? Are you a thinker or a doer, right? Like, and these things can be good with the right approach. And I think what's really cool here, because you can really butcher this if you do it the wrong way or you say the wrong things to people. But the way you broke it down really goes back, and it makes sense, right? Like of all three things that we're talking about here, they're all related to each other, right? They're all related. The priority, right? Well, you're evaluating someone based on how are they helping you get to that priority. Yes. Did you set the expectation, right, of them getting so it's really awesome to see this. And I know people are going to get a ton from the book. So before we kind of wrap up here and we tell people how to get a copy of the book and how they can work with you, what would you say to somebody who's, running their own business and they've thought about writing a book? What would you say to that person as somebody who is very systems oriented, someone who has done a more generic book versus someone who's done a very niche specific book? Like, what would you say to someone who's been thinking about writing a book for business growth?
Yeah. I would say there's no reason not to do it, because especially working with you and your team, the whole process is spelled out for you. So like you have both the, support and the accountability, and then the person and team to get you over the finish line. So if your objection is, I don't know how to make time for it, or I don't know how to think of an idea, that's all there. So it really becomes like, if you have an idea to share, you can't really afford not to do it, because, it's so like, not only do you make the facilitate the process so that you reduce overwhelm and ease, but you create a forum for us to get our ideas out in the world and be able to help people. Like this, the whole point of this book is to help make people's lives easier. And like, how could I not share that? Of course I have to share that, and I think I feel so lucky that I have this as a tool that I can bring, that I can give to people and share and have people, feel more empowered on, reducing that overwhelm as a business owner. So, to really lean into as a business owner, whatever is that idea that's either simmering inside or burning inside you that can help people, it kind of does a disservice to them to not put it out there into the world.
Yeah, it's a great way of thinking about it. And speaking of making lives easier, this book is making lives easier all day long. This episode has been making people's lives easier. How do we get a copy of The Unstoppable Team, and how do we support working with you?
Yeah. Well, I would love to give a gift to this audience specifically. So DM me on Instagram, the word unstoppable, or send me a LinkedIn message with the word unstoppable, and I'd love to send you a free copy. And so my Instagram is at Lia.Garvin, or look me up on LinkedIn, LIAGARVIN. So those are two places to get a hold of me as well, if you want to learn more. Or you can head to my website at liagarvin.com and sign up for a scale up strategy call, which is a place where we kind of dive into your team specifically, figure out, what are some of the challenges, and where, on that call, I offer a few tips and ideas just right out of the gate. And if it makes sense to work together, we go from there. Awesome. And then, check out my podcast. It's called Managing Made Simple. And every Tuesday episodes are really about giving you some specific tools to be able to manage with ease and feel more supported as a business owner.
Wow. Hey, that's very generous. And so everyone that's listening, look, you got the offer. Take her up on it, right? You just heard what she's capable of. You heard of the trifecta, right? We talked about 3 of the 6 key points that she talks about in her book, The Unstoppable Team. So make sure to grab a copy, DM her on Instagram, message her on LinkedIn, and she'll go ahead and send you a copy. Thank you for doing that. That's incredible. And here's my challenge to you as a listener today, okay? You've heard Lia talk about a lot of things. If you manage people, if you run a team, if you've ever felt stressed out about where you're headed as an entrepreneur, I want you to find one thing here, whether it's the priority, whether it's the expectation, whether it's the performance. Pick one of those things and spend 5 minutes and just reflect on this and do it. And if that's picking your number for your priority, if that's setting a new expectation or doing a journal prompt, or if that's asking yourself, how am I going to evaluate our team and our talent, or even your own performance? That is something that is my challenge to you. And I think that would be an unbelievable thing for everyone to do. So Lia, thank you for being here. And for everyone who just listened to this, I appreciate you. Let's get it and let's go.
Thank you so much for having me.